Okay, Bucky, it's all yours. You're good to
Okay, March the 26th, 1948, it was a Good Friday, and it was a day a lot like today. It was about probably 10 degrees warmer in March than it was today. It's about 84 degrees. It was warm enough that us kids was riding our bicycles with our shirts off. So we started riding. I remember going to Courtney's store in Reno. That was a big trip for us, and got a Coke and riding around about all day long. And there's about four of us, and one of them was Donnie Coffey, whose sister got burned up in the tornado. And so along about 4 o'clock, we finally called it a day, and I went home, and my mom immediately said, "You need to go to the store and get some bread and stuff for our supper meal, our dinner." So she said, "You better take your raincoat because it looked like it's going to rain." Just like it was today. It's sunny, and about 4 o'clock it clouded up. So I said, "No, I don't need it." So I walked up to town, and I met Durwood Gritton. He was there in front of what is now the Christian church, what do you call it?
Food pantry.
Yeah, the food pantry. He was standing there, and we started talking, and we had a view down the railroad, and we looked down the railroad, and if you ever seen an oil fire or a tire fire,
Yeah.
nothing big black billowing smoke. And we was discussing what that was. I said, "Well, I don't think the elevator's burning corn cobs, because they usually burn corn cobs." And so he suggested that we walk down there and see what it was. And I said, "Man, I'm getting scared." I said, "It might be an atomic bomb," because he just got out of the World War I. So he said, "I'm going to go down there and see what it is." So I ran. I was scared. I ran across the street, and Ernie Miller had just acquired the Kaiser Fraser dealership, and he'd built a new building right west of Lorry's, the restaurant up there. And so he was remodeling the place they tore down over here by the park,
Okay, yeah.
the old Chevrolet garage, and he was remodeling that, to part of his Kaiser Fraser dealership. So I ran across, went up the front door. He was standing inside the front door with Glen Curtis and Jimmy Curtis. Jim was probably about 7 years old at the time. And I ran up to the door, and Ernie was from Oklahoma. So I said, "Something is awful is happening out there." And he stepped the door. I remember him saying just, "Jesus Christ!" And he grabbed me under his arm. He was a big guy. He told Glen to grab Jimmy, and we headed down the basement. And we no more got to the bottom of the stairs, and that whole building just started caving in. One thing you hear was bricks falling and glass breaking and stuff. Well, it filled up the stairwell, and we couldn't get out. So they come up with a suggestion to find the old coal chute. So they got their cigarette lighter out, found the old coal chute, and lifted it down, and shoved me and Jimmy out, and then they climbed out. Well, after I got out, it was just an eerie silence. I looked around, and I had seen some movies about the World War I, some of the bombings. That's what it looked like. And it was just quiet. All at once you started hearing some whimpering. Then you started hearing some screaming. And the first person I saw when I got out of there was Donnie Coffey. Now he ran up to me and said, "Help me, my sister's burning up in that." And I looked over there, and that house was destroyed, and it was beginning to burn. I said, "I don't know what to do." And so he went running up the street to find somebody to help him. And it wasn't too long, they got the fire truck down there and started putting the fire out. So anyway, I got up to about to where the railroad track was, and I could see across the field there that our house was still standing. So I really wasn't that concerned about, what was happening to my grandma and my mom, and Ratchet was there. So I started going home, so I went down west to the elevator. I was going to cut down Mill Street, and there was so much debris the elevator was just all completely nothing but 50 foot of debris in the road. So I had to go back to town and circle around the other way. Well, by the time I got, I went by the gas station, which was there by the elevator, and I heard somebody groaning, and it sounded like Dad. And so I told Glen Wellman, he owned the gas station. I said, "That sounds like my dad in there." He said, "Well, we're taking care of everything." He says, "Go on home." So my dad, he was in there, and a big piece of the concrete off one of the silos that fell through the roof and hit him. He lost his leg. He had a broken shoulder, broken elbow, broken wrist, 13 broken ribs, and he spent 6 months in the hospital. So anyway, I got downtown in front of the drugstore, which was the food pantry, and there's a car had pulled up there. Purcell's or their last name. I can't think of their first name, but they pulled up, and Russell Siddons, Frankie's dad, he rode to work with him, and they just pulled up there at a 37 Chevy, and he was in the back seat, and that building there above where they tore down was a 2-story building. I think the Oddfellows Lodge was up above. Anyway, when they hit that top of that building, just fell on top of that car. That car wasn't 2 foot tall after all that brick fell on it. Well, by that time, Wayne Kivett was already there with his cutting torch, and he was, starting cutting the car out so they get them people out. So I stood there, watched what was going on there for a while, and they had them laid out on killed the driver and his wife, and they had them laid out on the sidewalk there in front of the pantry. And Russell Siddons, they finally got him an ambulance and took him to the hospital. So I watched that a little bit, and then I said, well, I better go home. So I went down by the Baptist church and down Water Street. And I got home, and the whole side of the house had lifted up like a garage door, and all the roof was tore off of it, and it started raining, and water was just pouring in the house. My grandma and my mom, they were standing there, and I told them, I said, I think my dad's been hurt. And so we didn't get much information that night. So that night we spent the night in a neighbor's house, and it was really late in the morning. I stood over the window and watched all the floodlights, and there wasn't no electricity because everything was destroyed. All the floodlights and the sirens coming and going and stuff like that. So the next morning we got a hold of my aunt and uncle, and they live up in Russellville. So they come down and got us and took us up there, and I spent the rest of my 5th grade at Green Township High School I think it's in Park County. And so we'd come back, maybe, I don't know, every a week or so, about every week we'd come back and get some supplies to help out my aunt and uncle, and get some clothes and stuff like that, because the Red Cross had that set up at the school. And so I'm still wondering what happened to Durwood.
I was going to ask you what happened to him, yeah.
Yeah, and so I asked around. Nobody had no idea where Durwood was at. They hadn't seen him. So finally we got some money somehow and built another house. And I remember when we moved back in the garage, somebody's garage, across from Baptist Church here. The Beck's, we lived in Beck's garage for a couple of months, I guess, during the hot summer, till we got the house done. It was finished like in maybe September, October. And so I was walking around town asking everybody, trying to find where anybody seen Durwood. Nobody had seen Durwood. And so one day, about 2 years later, I was walking down the sidewalk. I looked up there, and there come Durwood. I run up to him. I said, "Durwood, where have you been?" Well, so happens he actually lived in Amo, him and his mother, but he was visiting his grandfather on Broadway. Vern Walton was his grandfather, and he was visiting him. And he said his dad was in the army in Germany. So after the tornado, him and his mom moved to Germany and lived for 2 years on base. and that's where he was at all those 2 years. But I never could figure out where, where he was at, and so that's basically my basic story.
Okay. That's
I
interesting.
probably left something out, but I can't remember.
No, that's fine, that's,
Bucky, I'm curious, how
What's-
did you get in touch with your aunt and uncle?
The who?
Were you able to use the phone to get in touch with
You
your?
know, I
aunt?
don't know how we got hold of them.
Okay,
They may have heard about it on the news or something and come down here, or I'm just not sure how that all
I was curious.
come about. Well, the switchboard wasn't tore down, so it might have been still operative.
Okay,
Can I add to that a little bit?
yeah.
The, Lois was still at the switchboard. The lines south of town were still in operation. We lived south of Bethel Church, just very close to where Doc Haven's grandpa and grandma lived. And Lois was able to call people that direction and said, come to Coatesville, we need help. And my dad and my stepmother came directly because had an aunt and 3 cousins that lived, Pauline Starr, lived here in town, left me at my grandma and grandpa's. So there was phone service that way
Huh.
for a period of time until they started getting some of the debris out of the way, and then it went out.
You want to hear my story?
Sure.
I lived over here.
Hold on 1 second. Let's, grab that recorder there and pass that down. We'll get over here in front of home. So we can pick you up a little louder on this.
Yeah, but you can't hear me.
No, you just talk normally. Pretend's not.
Okay. I lived over here where, Catherine lived, the house behind Catherine. We built after the tornado, and it was a 2-story house, big old house, and it took everything off of it except the dining room. And we were getting ready to eat supper, but before that, Lawrence's, Fred and Fern Lawrence, not Fred, I don't remember what, Darrell, do you remember what his name was? Fern Lawrence and,
Fred?
was it Fred? Okay. And they had 2 girls, and school was out, as Becky said, and we had gone over there to play that afternoon, and the mother come out and said, you girls ought to be going home because I think it's going to storm. So we went home, and the mother and one of the girls was killed in the storm. So we got home just before that storm, and my dad said, he heard it sounded like a train, and my dad said, everybody get under the dining room table, there's something terrible happening. And we did, and that's probably the only reason we were not was saved. And as Becky said, afterwards it was just silent. You didn't hear anything, and then you started hearing crying. And our neighbor, which was the next house over in this corner, let's see, what was her name? Here's her Fern too, but I don't remember the last name. And she was out on the road crying and wanting something and wanting us to help her. And my grandpa lived over close to Heritage Lake on a farm, and he was milking cows, and he heard it, and he knew that it was a tornado. And he came to Coatesville and couldn't get any further than Reno and walked from Reno to Coatesville after us. And you had to really be careful because the lines were live and all that. But it was terrible. I was 12 years old. And it was devastating for everybody. It took all 3 churches.
Yeah. What did they categorize that tornado as?
I don't think.
I don't think they were.
I don't
Maybe they had categories back then.
I don't think they were.
Okay.
And you didn't have warnings like you do now.
Right,
It
yeah,
was a
no
t-
warning, yeah.
It was a tornado that stayed on the ground longer than most tornadoes.
Yeah, a lot of them jump or
Yeah.
touch down spots and kind of go.
I was from Amo, I was in Amo, and I was with a buddy of mine, Bobby Lewis, and his parents had the switchboard, telephone exchange, and we were sitting there on his back porch watching the storm come through. We didn't know it was a tornado because it was laying on the ground.
Yeah.
But from Amo, which is 5 miles away, we could see it. It was moving fast. And when it got through, then the phone rang from Coatesville saying they'd been hit by a tornado. So Bobby's dad and Bobby and I, we got in the car and came this north route and couldn't get through, circled way back around and came through the south route. And there was things that tornado had done that was just unbelievable. First thing I saw was somebody's hound dog way up on top of a tree, dead.
No.
And
Well, you can tell by those pictures, there just wasn't anything left.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a war zone.
Yeah, it was.
so.
But it was devastating.
Yeah, you never forget it if you've seen it.
And you know, to this day, and I'm sure that Bucky has this said to him, if you tell anybody you're from Coatesville, they'll say, "Oh, were you there when the tornado went through?" You know, older people. And the people remember it, because at that time, Coatesville probably was hit worse than anybody ever been hit by.
I might also say, like a week or so afterwards, sightseers came in, and from Amo to Coatesville was a solid string of traffic stopped. That's 5 miles of traffic.
Sightseers.
So,
I was in that.
was you in that?
Did you guys live up here when the tornado happened?
Yeah, we lived over here.
You had a cleaning business back
No,
then?
we didn't,
You did?
did not.
No, she didn't.
Oh.
We lived the house behind where Catherine is. It was a big two-story house.
But you had didn't you have a cleaning,
Yeah, but not at that
not
time.
then?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But it's something you would never forget. It was so bad for Melvin, he started to school the next year, and whenever it rained, he would appear in Joanna or I's class, and there was no way they could keep him out of it.
Now, if I remember right, the path of the tornado, it didn't hit Greencastle or anything, it just came down
It hit here first.
and, huh?
This,
It got,
It started just right southwest of 231 and 40,
Okay.
or northeast. And it finally went all the way to,
The Hadley or
the
Danville.
other side of Danville before it come back up.
you could take a state map, put a ruler down it, draw a straight line, and that's the exact path that tornado took.
Straight down. Oh.
Straight going northeast.